The bullies at Oak Ridge High laughed as they circled the quiet boy, never realizing they were mocking someone who had sacrificed his childhood to protect and raise his little sister. They thought they were tormenting an easy target. But everything changed the day a stranger, Liam Walker, stepped into the picture. To them, Daniel Cole was nothing but a poor, invisible nobody. His faded jeans, scuffed-up sneakers, and the threadbare hoodie he wore every single day made him stand out, but for all the wrong reasons. He rarely spoke, avoided attention, and kept his head down. To the bullies, that meant weakness. What they didn't realize was Daniel wasn't weak. He was holding up an entire world they couldn't even imagine. Daniel wasn't just a loner. He was a brother, a boy who had given up everything, his childhood, his dreams, his freedom, to take care of his 5-year-old sister, Emma. And soon, the ones who mocked him would learn the truth. The ghost in the hallways. Oak Ridge High was alive with its usual chaos. Lockers slamming shut, sneakers squeaking against polished tiles, kids laughing too loudly about things they thought mattered. Gossip about weekend parties and who was dating who buzzed in the air like static. In the middle of it all, Daniel Cole drifted through the hallways like a ghost. He didn't speak unless he had to. His clothes hung loose on his lean frame, and his backpack sagged from one shoulder, one strap hanging by a few loose stitches. He moved quickly, his eyes locked on the floor, as though he could slip away unnoticed. But someone noticed. The predator. Jason Reed was the king of Oak Ridge High. His father owned half the businesses in town, and his mom was president of the PDA. Tall, handsome, and dressed in designer clothes, Jason always had a crowd of sycophants around him. Logan, Carter, and Blake, his 3 shadows. He was charming when he wanted to be, cruel when he didn't. And Daniel? Daniel was his favorite pastime. Same hoodie again, Colt. Jason smirked one morning, lounging by his locker as Daniel passed by. What, did you make quit? Blake chuckled. Nah, I bet he doesn't even have running water. Daniel said nothing. He didn't even glance their way. He just kept walking, his shoulders tight, his grip on his backpack white-knuckled. Jason wasn't satisfied. He shoved Daniel's shoulder as he walked past. Daniel stumbled, but caught himself. Jason sneered. What's wrong? Cat got your tongue. Daniel exhaled slowly and kept going. He didn't have time for them. He never did. Lunchtime cruelty. The cafeteria was noisy, as usual. Daniel sat at his usual spot, alone, eating a peanut butter sandwich and drinking a small carton of milk. His eyes were distant, his mind somewhere else. Until Jason showed up. Jason slammed his hand down on Daniel's table. This is depressing, he announced. Look at you, sitting here like a sad little orphan. Eating, what is that? Prison food. Blake laughed. Maybe that's all he can afford. Daniel didn't react. He took another bite of his sandwich. But Jason wasn't one to be ignored. With a flick of his wrist, he knocked Daniel's lunch onto his lap. The entire cafeteria went silent. People stared, waiting to see what Daniel would do. Daniel wiped his hands, stood up quietly, and walked away. No anger, no tears, no fight. Jason hated it, but he wasn't done. Stealing survival. Days later, Daniel opened his locker to find his small stash of money gone. Every dollar he earned at his dishwashing job, saved carefully for Emma's school supplies and food, vanished. In its place was a note. Thanks for the lunch money, loser. Jason and his friends laughed across the hallway. Daniel slammed his locker shut and walked away without a word. But someone else had been watching. Liam Walker enters the picture. Liam Walker had been in town, filming a small indie movie. The Hollywood actor was known for his roles in action films, but he was far more observant than people gave him credit for. Liam noticed Daniel. He noticed how the boy moved like someone carrying a weight too heavy for his age. He saw how the other kids tormented him, and it didn't sit right. One evening, Liam followed Daniel after school. He kept a respectful distance as Daniel cut through alleyways and back streets, avoiding the main roads like he was trying to disappear. Eventually, Daniel arrived at a tiny, crumbling house on the edge of town. The yard was overgrown, and the porch light flickered weakly. Liam waited, unsure why he couldn't walk away. Then he saw her. A little girl ran to the door the moment Daniel opened it. She threw her arms around his waist, and he bent down, hugging her like she was the most precious thing in the world. He picked her up, carried her inside, and closed the door behind him. Liam exhaled. He understood now. Daniel wasn't just some quiet kid. He was raising his sister alone. The turning point. The next day, school continued as usual. Jason was already planning his next humiliation. "Look at those shoes," he whispered to Logan. "Think he's waiting for them to disintegrate?" Jason stuck his foot out as Daniel walked by. Daniel tripped, scattering his books. Jason stepped on Daniel's already broken sneaker, ripping the sole clean off. Laughter erupted. Daniel stared at his shoe for a long moment. Then he gathered his books, stuffed them into his bag, and limped away. Liam saw everything. Enough was enough. That afternoon, as Jason and his crew sat in the cafeteria, a shadow loomed over them. Liam Walker stood there, arms crossed. "You think you're tough?" Liam said quietly. Jason swallowed. "What's your problem, man?" "You," Liam said flatly. "And the way you tear people down to feel bigger." Jason tried to smirk, but it faltered. "What? Are you his bodyguard now?" Liam leaned in. "No, but maybe you should have one." The message was clear. Leave Daniel alone. Jason muttered something under his breath, but the damage was done. For the first time, someone stood up for Daniel Cole. A pair of shoes. That night, Daniel found a box on his porch. Inside was a brand new pair of sneakers, far better than anything he'd ever owned. A note was tucked inside. "No one fights alone." For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt something other than exhaustion. He felt hope. The next morning, Jason noticed the shoes. It unsettled him. He and his friends had stolen everything from Daniel, so where had he gotten those? Then Jason remembered Liam, and he felt something he wasn't used to feeling, doubt. The revelation. That afternoon, Jason did something unexpected. He followed Daniel home. He watched from outside as Daniel dropped his backpack on a rickety chair, and then a small girl ran into his arms. Jason stared through the window, realizing the truth. Daniel wasn't just some poor kid. He was raising his sister. Alone. And Jason had stolen from him. That night, Jason couldn't sleep. Guilt gnawed at him in a way it never had before. Making amends. The next day, Jason didn't join in the laughter. He didn't shove Daniel's books or trip him in the hallway. Instead, he left something in Daniel's locker, a new backpack with working zippers, and the exact amount of money he had stolen folded neatly inside. The note read, "I owe you one." Daniel stared at it, unsure what to think. He scanned the cafeteria, his eyes finding Jason. But Jason wasn't laughing. He wasn't even talking to his friends. He just sat there quiet. An unexpected apology. Later that afternoon, as Daniel walked home, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, fists clenched, expecting another ambush. But it was Jason. "I know you know it was me," Jason said. "I was a jerk. I didn't know about Emma, about your parents. I didn't get it before. You're not weak. You're stronger than any of us." Daniel didn't reply. He just stood there, watching. Jason shifted awkwardly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. But if anyone else gives you trouble, I'll make sure they stop." It wasn't much, but it was something, changing the narrative. Jason stopped laughing at Daniel. Logan and Blake followed his lead. The shoving ended. The laughter at Daniel's expense stopped. And Daniel? He still kept himself. Still worked late nights. Still raised Emma. But the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. Liam watched from afar. One day after Daniel's shift at the diner, Liam was waiting by his car. "He grew a conscience," Liam said, nodding toward Jason. Daniel exhaled. "I don't know if I can ever forgive him." "You don't have to," Liam said. "Forgiveness isn't about him. It's about you." Hope takes root. Winter came, and things got a little easier. One day, Daniel found an envelope in his locker. Inside was a note. No one should have to do this alone. Later, a scholarship application arrived in the mail. And when Emma found a brand new backpack waiting for her after school, she squealed with joy. Daniel sat on the couch, his hands shaking as he covered his face. He wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.